The video opens with a woman in her early 30s, Clara, sitting in a beautifully designed minimalist studio. Natural light floods the room, illuminating blueprints and architectural models on a large drafting table behind her. She looks directly at the camera, her expression calm but resolute. My brother used my life's work to pitch his startup to a legendary investor at our parents' 40th anniversary party. He gave a whole speech about his vision, using my blueprints, my renders, my soul, and passed it all off as his own. He just didn't realize that the investor, the woman he was trying to impress, was the same person who had personally handed me the National Heritage Award for Architectural Preservation 5 years earlier. She remembered my face. She remembered my work. And by the time she walked out of that party, my brother's future was already turning to dust. And the best part? I didn't have to say a single word. It was supposed to be the event of the decade for our family. My parents, Robert and Marian, hitting 40 years of marriage. It was a milestone that demanded more than just a cake and a few balloons. It demanded a statement. And in my family, statements were my brother Leo's department. I was the infrastructure. He was the glittering facade. I was the one who made things work. He was the one who made things look good. For this party, my role was, as usual, to be the silent, efficient engine beneath the hood of the whole operation. I spent 3 months planning it, not just booking a caterer, but designing the entire experience. I convinced my parents to host it at the old Atherton Conservatory, a place I had personally helped fundraise to restore 3 years prior. It was a gorgeous glass and steel cathedral of light that held a piece of my professional heart. I designed the lighting scheme to mimic the transition from dusk to starlight. I curated a gallery of family photos, scanning and restoring hundreds of old pictures, arranging them into a narrative that was both elegant and emotional. I handled the invitations, the seating charts that were a political minefield of ancient family feuds, the 7-piece jazz ensemble, and the custom menu that had to accommodate my mother's gluten-free but only on Tuesdays diet. I did all of this between site visits for my own firm, drafting proposals for new clients, and managing a team of 5 junior architects. I was running on fumes and black coffee, but I did it because deep down, a foolish part of me still thought that if I did everything perfectly, this time they might actually see me. Leo, of course, was in charge of the guest list. His primary contribution was ensuring the attendance of one person, Isabel Vance. She wasn't just any wealthy individual. She was a titan in the world of ethical investing and sustainable development. Her firm, Vance Capital, had the power to make or break companies with a single press release. Leo's new startup, Terra Nova, a vaguely defined eco-tech venture that promised to revolutionize urban living with smart grid algae somethings, was desperate for her backing. Getting Isabel Vance to a family party was, in Leo's words, the ultimate synergy. He spoke about it like he had single-handedly brokered a peace treaty. I remember standing in the conservatory 2 hours before the party started, adjusting a floral arrangement. My hands smelled like eucalyptus and roses. I was wearing a simple navy blue silk dress I'd bought for the occasion. Professional, understated, invisible. Leo breezed in, already in his custom-tailored suit, smelling of expensive cologne and ambition. He didn't look at the flowers, or the lights, or the string quartet tuning their instruments in the corner. He looked straight past it all. "Hey," he said, tapping on his phone. "Isabel's car is 10 minutes out. The presentation is queued up on the main projector, right?" "The slideshow of Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Yes, it's ready to go after the main course." He waved a dismissive hand. "No, not that. My presentation. The Terra Nova pitch deck. I'm doing a little toast, a surprise for Mom and Dad, and I want to weave it in. Show them what the future of the family legacy looks like." I felt a familiar cold knot tighten in my stomach. "Leo, this is their anniversary party, not a shareholder meeting." "Clara, don't be so literal." He sighed, with that patented tone of condescension he reserved just for me. It was the tone that said, "You're smart, I guess, but you just don't get the big picture." It's about narrative. Legacy. Isabel Vance doesn't invest in companies. She invests in stories. And tonight, our family is the story. He clapped me on the shoulder, a gesture that was meant to feel like camaraderie but landed like a dismissal. "Just make sure it all runs smoothly. You're great at that stuff." And then he was gone, off to greet his prize guest, leaving me in the middle of the beautiful, intricate world I had built, feeling like a ghost at my own creation. I should have known then. The warning signs weren't just flags. They were giant, illuminated billboards, and I had been driving past them my whole life. I took a deep breath, straightened my dress, and put on the polite, vacant smile that was expected of me. The smile of the person who gets things done. The smile of the good daughter. The helpful sister. The smile I wore just before I was about to be completely erased. The problem wasn't a single event. It was a lifetime of subtle cuts, a pattern woven so deeply into the fabric of our family that I'd stopped recognizing it as a pattern and just accepted it as the texture of my life. It was death by 1,000 paper cuts. My brother Leo wasn't just the golden child. He was the sun around which my parents' universe orbited. I was, at best, a useful moon, reflecting his light and managing the gravitational pull of reality, so he could continue to shine without consequence. It started early. When I was 10, I spent an entire summer building a ridiculously detailed, multi-level treehouse in our backyard. I drew my own blueprints, saved my allowance to buy nails and wood stain, and learned how to use a saw under the begrudging supervision of our neighbor. The day I finished it, I brought my parents out to see it, my heart pounding with pride. My father looked up at it, squinted, and said, "Huh, make sure you don't get splinters." Later that week, Leo, who was 12, entered a school science fair with a model volcano he'd made from a kit. It erupted pink foam. He got a third-place ribbon. My mother had it framed. It hung in the hallway for the next 15 years. The treehouse rotted and was torn down 2 years later, after a storm. No one mentioned it. When it came time for college, I knew my parents had a finite amount of money saved. I applied for every scholarship I could find, wrote essays until my fingers cramped, and got a full academic ride to one of the top architecture schools in the country. I remember telling them the news over dinner. My mother smiled faintly. "That's wonderful, dear. Architecture, though, such long hours. Are you sure you'll have time for a social life?" It wasn't a question of celebration, but of concern trolling. As if my ambition were a character flaw that needed managing. 2 years later, Leo decided he wanted to launch a clothing brand. It was called Apex Threads and consisted mostly of overpriced t-shirts with abstract logos. He needed seed money, My parents, without telling me, took out a second mortgage on the family home to give him $50,000. The brand folded in less than 18 months. The debt remained. When I found out, I wasn't angry. I was just empty. I asked my mother why they would risk so much on something so flimsy. She got a defensive look in her eyes. You have to support vision, Clara. Leo feels things. He has big ideas. Your path is so secure. You never needed our help like he does. You never needed our help. That was the line they used to justify the imbalance. My competence was used against me. My independence was framed as a lack of need. I paid for my own master's degree by working 3 jobs. I bought my first car, a sensible used sedan, with my own savings. I built my career from the ground up, one late night, one meticulously drafted plan at a time. Every achievement of mine was met with a polite, distant nod. It was expected. It was Clara being Clara. Meanwhile, every one of Leo's ventures, no matter how reckless, was celebrated as a bold stroke of genius. The failed app that was supposed to be the Uber for dog walkers. The disastrous attempt at importing artisanal coffee beans from a country he couldn't find on a map. Each failure was followed by a family summit, where my parents would talk about market volatility and unfortunate timing, reframing his poor judgment as heroic risk-taking. And I was always there, in the background, making the coffee for the meeting, listening to them discuss how to bail him out again. The ultimate irony was that my work, my actual tangible work, was quietly propping up the family myth. When my parents' roof started leaking, I was the one who found a reliable contractor and supervised the repairs, paying for half of it out of my own pocket as a gift. When Leo needed a sophisticated presentation space for a potential investor, I let him use my firm's conference room, complete with the state-of-the-art projection system. I even spent a weekend helping him design the layout for his Terra Nova office space, a project I did pro bono, because he said my name on the plans would give it architectural cred. I sketched out an innovative, sustainable design. Open plan, lots of natural light, reclaimed materials. A design I was proud of. A design that I foolishly thought was a collaboration. I emailed him the final CAD files and blueprints. "This is amazing, Clara," he texted back. "You're a lifesaver." I was always the lifesaver, the fixer, the safety net. I just never realized I was the one they would be willing to sacrifice to save him. The party was in full swing. The jazz ensemble played softly, the clinking of glasses and murmur of conversations, filling the warm, plant-filled air of the conservatory. I had done a good job. The space felt alive, elegant, and warm. My parents were glowing, moving through the crowd, accepting congratulations. I saw Leo schmoozing near the bar, his arm casually draped around Isabel Vance's chair. She was an imposing woman, even sitting down. Sharp, intelligent eyes, a silver streak in her dark hair, and an aura of someone who does not suffer fools gladly. I felt a pang of professional admiration mixed with a knot of anxiety. After the main course, my father tapped a glass with a fork. The room quieted down. He gave a sweet, rambling speech about my mother, and they shared a kiss that earned a collective awe from the guests. It was lovely. Then he said, "And now, our son Leo has a few words he'd like to share about the future." My heart sank. This was it. Leo strode to the front, grabbing the microphone with the practiced ease of a TED Talk presenter. He was beaming, radiating a confidence that was almost blinding. "Thank you, Dad." "Mom, Dad, 40 years. That's more than a marriage. It's a legacy," he began, his voice smooth and resonant. "And it's that spirit of building something lasting, something with vision, that I want to talk about tonight. Some of you know I've been working on a new venture, Terra Nova. It's more than a company. It's a philosophy. It's about creating a sustainable future, a new way of living in our cities." He gestured to the large screen behind him. The slideshow of my parents' wedding photos vanished, replaced by a sleek corporate logo. Terra Nova. My stomach twisted. "To build the future, you need a blueprint," he continued, his eyes scanning the room, landing deliberately on Isabel Vance. "And I want to give you all a sneak peek at the physical manifestation of that blueprint, the heart of our vision, our first headquarters." And then it happened. On the screen, in stunning, high-resolution 3D, was my design. The open-plan office, the reclaimed timber beams, the living green wall I had spent a week designing. It was my work, my lines, my concept, my hours of painstaking detail. The camera in the render panned through the space, lingering on the exact features I had sketched. He had taken my files and had a professional animation studio turn them into a glossy video. "This is a space I designed to reflect our core values," Leo said, his voice filled with fake passion. "Transparency, sustainability, a connection to nature. Every single element, from the recycled steel frame to the passive solar heating system, was conceived to create a new standard for corporate architecture." I stood frozen at the back of the room, near the catering station. A wave of nausea washed over me. He wasn't just taking credit. He was performing a masterclass in it. He was using my language, my concepts. He was narrating a tour of my own mind and claiming it as his. I looked over at my parents. My mother had tears in her eyes, her hand clasped over her mouth in awe. My father was nodding, his chest puffed out with pride, slapping the shoulder of the man next to him and pointing at the screen. They believed him. Of course they believed him. The room was filled with impressed murmurs. I saw Isabel Vance lean forward slightly, her expression unreadable but intense. Leo's gaze was locked on her. "This isn't just an office building," he concluded, his voice dropping to a dramatic, inspiring whisper. "It's a statement. It's the first step in a revolution. And it's a testament to the legacy of innovation that my parents started 40 years ago." The room erupted in applause. People were turning to my parents, congratulating them on raising such a visionary son. Leo took a bow, a triumphant grin plastered on his face. He caught my eye across the room. He gave me a tiny conspiratorial wink. A wink that said, "See? I told you it would work. Aren't you proud to be a part of this?" In that moment, something inside me didn't just break. It vaporized. The polite smile on my face felt like a mask made of concrete. I couldn't breathe. All the air had been sucked out of the room, replaced by the deafening sound of his lie and their applause. He hadn't just stolen my work. He had stolen my voice, my name, my very presence in a room full of people who had known me my entire life. And no one had noticed. Or worse, no one had cared. I didn't storm out. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene that would confirm their narrative of me being difficult or overly emotional. Instead, a strange, chilling calm settled over me. It was the calm of a circuit breaker flipping off, of a system shutting down to prevent a catastrophic overload. The performance was over. My role in this family play had just been written out of the script, in real time. I turned and walked silently out of the main hall, through a side door that led to the conservatory's quiet, dimly lit fern garden. I leaned against the cool glass wall and took a deep, shuddering breath. The sound of the party, the laughter and music, was muffled now, a world away. It was over, not just the party, but the hope, the decades-long foolish hope that one day my efforts would be valued, that I would be seen. I watched as Isabel Vance, the investor, stood up. She had a brief, polite word with my parents, then with Leo. He was nodding eagerly, his face alight with triumph. But as she turned to leave, her eyes swept the room. Her gaze paused for a fraction of a second, scanning the faces as if looking for someone. Then, with a curt nod to the host, she was gone. I stayed in the fern garden until I heard the party begin to wind down. I slipped out a back exit, got into my car, and drove home, in complete silence. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I felt hollowed out, scoured clean of all emotion. When I got back to my apartment, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked over to my desk, the glow of my monitor the only illumination in the room, and I began to work. First, I opened my email. I drafted a short, formal, and legally airtight letter to Leo. Subject: Withdrawal of architectural plans for Terra Nova. HQ project. Leo, this email serves as formal notification that I am immediately withdrawing all architectural designs, blueprints, CAD files, and conceptual renderings previously provided by me for the proposed Terra Nova headquarters project. All usage rights are hereby revoked. Continued use of these intellectual properties in any form will constitute a copyright infringement. Clara, I attached a PDF of my official architectural license and digital signature. I hit send. The soft whoosh of the email leaving my outbox was the loudest sound in the apartment. Second, I logged into the city's online portal for building permits. I found the preliminary application for the Terra Nova project that Leo had filed, the one that listed me as the project's lead architect to give it legitimacy. With a few clicks, I submitted a formal request to have my name and license number expunged from the application, citing withdrawal of services. An automated confirmation receipt appeared in my inbox. Third, I went to my personal cloud storage. I found the shared folder labeled Family Help, the one filled with financial documents, contractor contacts, scanned receipts for repairs I'd covered, and the detailed budget breakdown I had created for my parents' monthly expenses after my father had been downsized from his job 2 years earlier. A budget I quietly subsidized every month to keep them afloat, without them ever having to ask. I changed the password. Then I deleted Leo's access. It wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of severance. It was a quiet, digital demolition. He wanted to build a legacy on my foundation. I was simply taking my foundation back. For years, I had been the silent partner in their lives, the invisible infrastructure holding everything together. But infrastructure has to be maintained. It has to be respected. Otherwise, it fails. And I was done. I shut my laptop, went to my bedroom, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep for the first time in months. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peace. To understand the cold precision of my actions that night, you have to understand that Leo's performance wasn't a one-off mistake. It was the grand finale of a lifetime of rehearsals. This dynamic was our family's oldest and most sacred tradition. I remember my 16th birthday. I had saved up for months to buy a professional-grade drafting table. It was the only thing I wanted. I'd circled it in a catalog and left it on the kitchen counter. On my birthday morning, my parents presented me with a small, beautifully wrapped box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace. "It's so you can look pretty when you go out with your friends," my mother said, smiling. "You can't just be hunched over a desk all the time." I thanked them, my throat tight. That afternoon, Leo, who was 18, came home with a speeding ticket, his third in 6 months. I heard my father on the phone with the insurance company, his voice a mixture of exasperation and veiled pride. "The boy's just got a lead foot, you know. Full of energy." The next day, there was a brand new, top-of-the-line radar detector in Leo's car. A gift from my dad to help him be more aware. I sold the necklace a week later and bought the drafting table myself. The disparity wasn't just in things. It was in how our ambitions were framed. My desire to be an architect was treated like a quirky, slightly inconvenient hobby. It was Clara's little projects. My studio in my apartment was the craft room. When I won my first major award, the Young Innovators Grant, I called them ecstatic. "Oh, that's nice, honey," my dad said, distracted. "Listen, can you talk to your brother? He's having a crisis of confidence about his new import-export idea." My success was an interruption. His crisis was a priority. His crises were always expensive. The time he decided to become a day trader and lost $7,000 of their retirement savings in a week was chalked up to a valuable learning experience. They helped him pay off the credit card debt. The time I needed emergency dental surgery for a cracked molar, I had to take out a personal loan because they told me they were a little tight that month. I later found out tight that month meant they had just paid for Leo to attend a 2-week entrepreneurial retreat in Bali. The most painful part was how they recruited me into his cleanup crew. I was the responsible one, so I was expected to mitigate his irresponsibility. When he dropped out of his MBA program, with a semester to go, my mother called me in tears. "Can you talk to him, Clara? He listens to you. You're so grounded. Maybe you can help him find his focus." I spent hours with him, helping him draft a business plan for his next idea, trying to inject some reality into his fantastical projections. I was essentially providing free consulting services to prop up the myth of his genius, a myth my parents were desperate to believe. My work, the very thing that should have been my greatest source of pride, became a tool for them. When they had important friends over, my mother would say, "Clara is an architect, you know," as if it were a charming, interesting fact, like owning a rare breed of dog. But they never asked about my projects. They never read the articles I was featured in. They never came to the opening ceremonies for the community centers or libraries I designed. They saw the title, but they refused to see the work. This is why, when Leo stood on that stage, presenting my designs, it was more than plagiarism. It was the logical conclusion of our entire family history. He wasn't just stealing a set of drawings. He was cashing in on a lifetime of being told his vision mattered more than my reality. He had been taught, lesson by lesson, that my resources, my time, my money, my talent, my labor, were his to consume. And my parents, with their applause and their teary-eyed pride, were the ones who had set the table for him. They had served me up on a silver platter. The quiet rage that had been simmering inside me for 20 years finally cooled into something much harder and more durable. Resolve. I wasn't going to be their sacrifice anymore. The morning after the party, the world felt different, sharper. I woke up not with a hangover of anger, but with a clean, quiet clarity. I made coffee, sat at my sun-drenched drafting table, and for the first time in a long time, I sketched for myself. No client, no deadline, just the joy of a pencil on paper. It felt like coming home. The silence from my family lasted for exactly 72 hours. It was a new record. Then, on Wednesday afternoon, my phone rang. It was Leo. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text message appeared. "Call me. Urgent." I ignored it. I was in the middle of reviewing a zoning proposal for a low-income housing project, and it was infinitely more important. 10 minutes later, he called again. I let it ring. Then, a text from my mother. "Leo is trying to reach you. Please answer your phone. It's a family matter." A family matter. That was their code for a Leo problem that you are now expected to solve. I put my phone on silent and went back to work. The dam finally broke around 5 p.m. A frantic call from Leo, which I again ignored. Then a voicemail that was practically vibrating with panic. "Clara, pick up the phone. What the hell did you do?" I just got off a call with Isabel Vance's assistant. She's re-evaluating. She's asking for provenance documents for the architectural designs. Provenance? What is that even? She mentioned your name. She said she remembered you from some heritage award thing. Why didn't you tell me you knew her? You've put me in an impossible position. Call me back. You need to fix this. Now. You need to fix this. The 4 words that had defined my role as his sister. Only this time, I wasn't the cause of the problem, and I certainly wasn't going to be the solution. I deleted the voicemail. An hour later, my mother called. This time, I answered, putting the phone on speaker as I continued to make notes on my blueprint. "Clara, thank God," she began, her voice tight with anxiety. "Your brother is falling apart. This woman, this investor, is pulling out. She's saying something about a misrepresentation of creative assets. That's your world, that language. What is going on?" "I have no idea what you're talking about," I said calmly, my voice even. "Don't play dumb, Clara. Leo said she mentioned you. He said you did something with the permits. You're sabotaging him. After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us? You know how important this was for him. For the family. Everything we've done for you." The words hung in the air, so absurd they were almost funny. I stopped drawing. "Mom," I said, and my voice was devoid of heat, of anger, of anything but fact. Let me be very clear. Leo stood up in front of 100 people and claimed my work as his own. He lied. The creative assets he misrepresented belonged to me. The sabotage was me simply reclaiming what is mine. This is not a family matter. It is a matter of professional integrity and copyright law. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear her trying to process a version of events that didn't center around Leo as the hero. He was just trying to create a narrative, she stammered, falling back on his buzzwords. He was honoring you, in a way, including your work in his vision. Honoring me? I almost laughed. He erased me. He stood on a stage in a building I helped save, presented designs I created, and didn't mention my name once. He didn't honor me, Mom. He used me. And you all applauded. You're being so dramatic, she snapped, her voice turning sharp. This is your jealousy talking. You've always been jealous of his charisma, his ability to dream big. I'm not jealous of his dreams, Mom. I'm tired of paying for them, I said. My work paid for them. My time paid for them. My silence paid for them. But my name, my reputation, that's not for sale. Not anymore. You are tearing this family apart, she finally shrieked, the raw panic breaking through. Isabel Vance is a powerful person. The story will get out. Leo's reputation will be ruined. You have to call her. You have to explain that it was all a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding, I said softly. She understood perfectly. Perhaps for the first time, someone did. I hung up the phone. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't upset. I felt a profound, almost tectonic shift inside me. The foundation of my identity, which had for so long been tied to their approval, had cracked open, and what was emerging was something new. Something that was entirely my own. The fallout was swifter and more brutal than I could have imagined. Leo didn't just lose Isabel Vance's investment. He was unofficially blacklisted. Vance was a kingmaker in the sustainable tech world, and her quiet withdrawal sent a ripple effect through the entire community. The story, as my mother had feared, got out. It wasn't loud or public, but it was worse. It was a series of whispers in the places that mattered. Boardrooms, venture capital lunches, and exclusive tech conferences. The narrative wasn't about a simple misunderstanding. It was about a founder with a fatal character flaw. A man who would lie about the very foundation of his own company. His vision was revealed to be nothing more than a borrowed set of clothes. Within a month, Terra Nova was dead. The other potential investors, who had been circling, vanished. His co-founder, a brilliant software engineer Leo had poached from a rival company, quit, citing a fundamental misalignment of values. Leo's name, which had once been his greatest asset, was now toxic. My family's reaction was to circle the wagons, not around the family, but around Leo. They treated me like a foreign enemy who had launched an unprovoked attack. My father, who hadn't initiated a call with me in over a year, left me a stiff, formal voicemail. Your actions have had severe consequences, Clara. I am profoundly disappointed. We expect you to make this right. Make it right? It was astonishing. In their eyes, the crime wasn't the theft. It was the exposure of the theft. The problem wasn't Leo's lie. It was that he got caught. I didn't respond to any of it. I created a new filter in my email that sent any message from their addresses directly to a folder named Archive, unread. I blocked their numbers. It wasn't a dramatic flounce. It was a quiet, necessary act of preservation. I was creating a firewall to protect my own peace. The real surprise came about 2 months after the party. I received a formal-looking envelope at my office. It was from Vance Capital. My heart hammered in my chest as I opened it. It wasn't a legal threat or a request for a statement. It was a letter on thick, creamy cardstock, signed personally by Isabel Vance. Dear Miss Hayes, I am writing to you for 2 reasons. Firstly, to offer my sincere apologies. At your parents' anniversary celebration, I found myself in the awkward position of witnessing a clear and deeply unethical misrepresentation of your work. Your design for the Terra Nova project, which I now know was entirely yours, is exceptional. I had, in fact, remembered your name and portfolio from the National Heritage Awards 5 years ago. Your work on the Atherton Conservatory was what drew me to that event in the first place, though I did not realize your connection to the host family until it was too late. My silence at that moment was one of professional decorum, but it was a silence I regret. Secondly, I was so impressed by the integrity and intelligence of your designs that I took the liberty of reviewing your firm's public portfolio. Your focus on sustainable, human-centric architecture is precisely the kind of innovation my firm seeks to support. We are launching a new philanthropic arm, the Vance Foundation for Urban Renewal, dedicated to funding projects that revitalize community spaces in underserved neighborhoods. I believe you would be the perfect architect to lead our flagship project. I have attached a preliminary brief. If this is something that might interest you, my office will reach out to schedule a meeting at your convenience. Sincerely, Isabel Vance. I read the letter 3 times. My hands were trembling. It wasn't just a job offer. It was a vindication. It was a lifeline thrown from a world I thought was indifferent to me. A world where work was judged on its merit, not on the charisma of the person presenting it. A world where my name wasn't something to be erased, but something to be sought out. The ripple effects continued to spread, but now they were creating something new. The implosion of Leo's career forced my parents to confront a reality they had spent decades avoiding. Without the prospect of their son's imminent tech billionaire status, their financial situation was stark. The second mortgage they had taken out for his first failed venture was still a heavy burden. The quiet subsidy I had been providing was gone. They had to sell the family home, the one filled with all those framed photos of Leo's achievements. I heard from a cousin that they had downsized to a small rental apartment across town. I felt a pang of sadness, not for them, but for the house itself. I had loved that house, but I knew it wasn't my fault. I hadn't pushed them off a cliff. I had simply stopped holding them up, and they had discovered they were standing on thin air. The meeting with Isabel Vance was unlike any professional encounter I'd ever had. It wasn't a pitch. It was a conversation. We sat in her stunning corner office overlooking the city, and for 2 hours we talked about architecture. Not about budgets or timelines, but about philosophy. About how buildings can shape communities. How thoughtful design can foster connection. How preserving history is a way of building a better future. She didn't just see my portfolio. She saw the intention behind it. Your brother, she said at one point, her gaze direct but not unkind. He knows how to sell a story. But you, Mrs. Hayes, you know how to build one. That is a much rarer and more valuable skill. I walked out of that meeting with a signed contract to be the lead architect on the Foundation's first major project, the transformation of a derelict waterfront warehouse district into a thriving hub of art studios, public parks, and affordable housing. It was more than a dream project. It was the culmination of everything I had ever worked for. It was real. It was mine. The lesson in all of this came to me slowly, not as a sudden epiphany, but as a quiet, growing realization. For my entire life, I had been operating under a false premise. I thought that love and acceptance were transactional, that if I was useful enough, responsible enough, and silent enough, I would eventually earn my place. I thought my value was determined by my utility to others. My family, particularly my parents, had taught me this. They had created a system where Leo's needs were the central focus, and my role was to be a resource for those needs. My worth wasn't intrinsic. It was measured by how much I could contribute to his success and their comfort. The anniversary party wasn't the crime. It was merely the symptom of a disease that had been festering for decades. The disease was a fundamental lack of respect, a willful blindness to who I was in favor of what I could provide. When I finally withdrew that support, the system collapsed, and in their panic, they tried to blame me for breaking it, never once considering that the system itself was broken. They didn't see that they had built their family on a faulty foundation, one that valued image over substance, charisma over character, and dreams over the hard work it takes to make them real. The real lesson wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about sovereignty. It was about understanding that my worth is not up for negotiation. My talent is not a community resource for my family to exploit. My peace of mind is not something to be sacrificed on the altar of someone else's ego. By stepping away, by refusing to fix the mess Leo had created, I wasn't destroying the family. I was saving myself. I was choosing my own well-built, carefully designed reality over their crumbling facade. Isabel Vance's letter wasn't just a job offer. It was a mirror. It showed me a reflection of myself that my family had never allowed me to see. A competent, respected professional whose work had inherent value. Someone worthy of being seen. True validation, I realized, doesn't come from people who are determined to misunderstand you. It comes from those who share your values, who speak your language. It comes from building a life and a career so solid, so authentic, that it stands on its own, with or without anyone else's approval. I had spent years trying to get a seat at their table, never realizing I had the skills and the vision to build my own damn table, in a room with a much better view. It's been over a year now. The silence from my family is total. I haven't seen or spoken to them since that last, panicked phone call from my mother. The firewall I erected has held strong. It wasn't an act of anger, but one of profound and necessary self-care. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself is to refuse to participate in a dynamic that demands your diminishment. The warehouse project, now officially named the Meridian Project, is well underway. It's the most challenging and rewarding work of my life. My days are filled with site visits, team meetings, and the thrilling, messy process of turning a vision into a physical reality. My firm has grown, and I've hired 2 more young architects who are just as passionate about community-focused design as I am. I'm not just building buildings anymore. I'm building a team, a culture, A legacy that is authentically mine. A few weeks ago, I received an email, forwarded from a distant cousin. It was a long, rambling message from my mother. It wasn't an apology, not really. It was a classic piece of revisionist history. It spoke of misunderstandings and everyone being under a lot of stress. It detailed their financial struggles and how lonely they were in their new, small apartment. It painted a picture of two elderly parents abandoned by their cold, unforgiving daughter. And it ended with a single, desperate line. Leo is trying to start over. He's taking a real estate course. Maybe you could give him some advice. Help him get back on his feet. I stared at that line for a long time. They still didn't get it. After everything that had happened, they still saw me as a resource for him. They hadn't learned a thing. I didn't feel anger. Just a deep, quiet sadness for them. A sadness for the relationship we could have had if they had only been willing to see the daughter they had, instead of the one they found it convenient to use. I archived the email without a reply. My life isn't defined by their absence. It's defined by the presence of new things. It's defined by the respect of my colleagues, the friendship of people like Isabel who see and value my work, and the deep satisfaction of creating something meaningful in the world. My family is no longer the sun I orbit. It's a distant, fading star I can occasionally see in my rearview mirror. I wish them no ill will, but I'm not navigating by their light anymore. I'm charting my own course. So I want to ask you, the person watching this, have you ever had to build a wall, not to keep others out, but to finally let yourself live? Have you ever had to choose between the family you were born into and the person you were born to be? It's a terrifying choice, but sometimes it's the only one that leads to peace. Tell me your story in the comments below. I promise you, I'm reading every single one. And if this story resonated with you, I hope you'll subscribe. There's so much more to build.